everyone. Today we'll be hosting Professor Dr. Martina Gračanin Yüksek at the 121st event of the İzmir Linguistics Circle. Welcome Martina Hocam.
Hoş buldum.
Hoş geldiniz tekrardan. Let me give you brief information about her. The Professor Yüksek works in the Foreign Language Education Department at the Middle East Technical University and in the Foreign Language Education Department. Her research interests are mostly on syntax and morphology, especially on the topics like agreement, multi-dominance, and linearization. And as you've seen, today's topic is share structure, except when you can't share structure. Again, thank you for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours, dear Professor.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. I am going to share my screen. And you should tell me whether you can see it. Can everybody see it? Can it be seen?
We can see you.
Okay, perfect. So in that case, I'm going to start. So this presentation is going to be about two different operations by which we make material not pronounced. So sharing here in the title refers to multiple dominance, and this crossed out part of the title here indicates ellipsis. And this presentation is part of the joint work that I have conducted with Barbara Chitko from University of Washington. And this is part of the paper that we are hoping will be published, should be published either this month or at the beginning of next year. So it's almost out there. And to begin with, we're going to notice that very often sentences that the speakers produce are actually richer in their semantics than they are in their phonology. So very often we interpret more than we hear, as are examples that you can see here. So for example, VP ellipsis, where you see Peter will go to school tomorrow, and so will I go to school tomorrow. Go to school tomorrow is interpreted but not heard. The same with gapping. John likes apples and Mary oranges, where the verb goes missing. And for example, in sleuthing, Bill knows Amy is coming, but he doesn't know when. Amy is coming is again interpreted but not pronounced. So I will refer to such phonologically impoverished sentences as PF-reduced sentences. So we're going to talk about PF reduction to not imply what kind of operation that is. And we're going to claim, my main claim today is going to be that PF reduction is subject to economy. So the principle of economy, which does two things. It favors least effort derivations. So derivations that use fewest lexical resources and involve fewest operations from the set of possible derivations that arrive at the same string with the same interpretation. So two derivations will be in competition with one another when they both result in the same string and the same interpretation. And the other thing that economy does is it bans derivations in which PF reducing operations apply vacuously. And what I mean by that is that you apply a PF reducing operations, for example, you delete something, but that does not have any effect on pronunciation. Okay, so two mechanisms of PF reduction that we're going to talk about today are multiple dominance or sharing, which is looks like this, right? So John loves and Mary hates cheap novels. This is an example of right note raising, where what we interpret is John loves cheap novels and Mary hates cheap novels. And the MD analysis of that would have cheap novels, which is multiply dominated, and shared between the two conjuncts, the John conjunct and the Mary conjunct. So cheap novels is merged as the sister to both hates and loves. What it means for something to be shared is, for example, all of these nodes that are shaded in the picture share this object, cheap novels, and we could informally say that sharing is at play whenever a node shares something that it dominates, if there is a route or a path from that something to the route that doesn't go through that node. So from cheap novels, which we could go to the route through the John conjunct, and we could also go through the Mary conjunct. So that means that all of these nodes share this one element. The other mechanism of PF reduction that I'll talk about today is ellipses that we all know and love. So this would be the ellipsis derivation of the same sentence, where we construct both conjuncts independently of one another. Nothing is shared, nothing is multiply dominated. There are cheap novels in the second conjunct, but also in the first conjunct. And then what we do is we delete the object in the first conjunct. That gives us, again, John loves and Mary hates cheap novels. So my main claim is going to be that economy favors the derivation that involves multiple dominance over the derivation that involves ellipses, again, whenever the string and the interpretation that are arrived at are the same. And this is because multiple dominance requires fewer lexical resources and fewer operations of merge and agree compared with the ellipsis derivation. So if you look at them side by side like this, this is what I'm talking about. So cheap novels appears only once. So you use only one instance of cheap and one instance of novels. You have to merge them only once. Whereas in the ellipsis derivation, you have to do all of that twice. So you have to use cheap twice and novels twice, and you have to perform the merge operation that puts them together twice. So that is this preferred. And also, in addition to using more lexical resources and more merge operations, you also need to use an ellipsis operation. An ellipsis operation has to be triggered somehow, and be it a feature or some instruction to the PF. And if you can do without it, then that's preferred. That's the claim that I'm going to be defending today. The empirical domain where that we take into consideration, Barbara and I, in this work, involves the PF reduced constructions in which the remnants, right, are WH phrases that are they're only in remnants if we talk about ellipses, but I use this term in a more general sense. And these are coordinated questions. These are things that I have been working on and off since my dissertation. Things like what and when did John teach, which is PF reduced because it is interpreted as what did John teach and when did John teach. So there are two different questions, which means something is missing from the first conjunct. And the other one is coordinated sluices. And coordinated sluices are structures like 8. So I know John taught something, but I forget what and when. Where what and when look at as if they were coordinated with one another, but the interpretation tells us that that probably isn't the case, because what we interpret here is more or less, and I will modify this a little bit later, but I forget what John taught and when John taught. So we will be comparing these two in order to argue for the claim that a multidominance is favored over ellipses. So the first step in doing that is going to be establishing differences between coordinated questions and coordinated sluices, because they are not the same. So the way they look, it looks as if you could derive the coordinated sluice, what and when, by constructing a coordinated question and then getting rid of this part here. So my first order of business is going to be to show that that's not the case. That, in fact, coordinated sluices and coordinated questions differ on a number of diagnostics. And the first one is going to regard the coordination of obligatory WH arguments of the verb. So we will see that such coordination is impossible in coordinated questions, but it is possible in coordinated sluices. So one case where this can be seen is cases where both WH phrases are obligatory arguments of the verb. So something like this: what and to whom did John give, where we have the verb give, which is a ditransitive verb. It requires both a direct object and an indirect object, and you cannot coordinate them in a coordinated question. So speakers judge this as unacceptable. But you can do that in coordinated sluices. So you can say, I heard that John gave something to someone, but I forgot what and to whom. So what John gave to someone and to whom he gave it, that's the interpretation of this, and that is well formed. The same is observed when there is only one WH phrase, which is the obligatory argument of the verb. So if you look at sentences like 11, where the verb is by, so it is a verb that obligatorily requires an object, you cannot have that object as part of the coordination. So you cannot say what and when did John buy. But you can, of course, in coordinated sluices. So you can say, I heard that John bought something sometime last week, but I forgot what and when, where what, despite being an obligatory argument of by, can be coordinated with when. And the final difference that I'll talk about is interpretation between coordinated questions and coordinated sluices. So coordinated question, even though both of these structures require clausal coordination, so we have a feeling that what we are interpreting are two WH questions, those interpretations are not exactly the same. So the difference comes from the availability of so-called paired reading, which coordinated questions disallow, but coordinated sluices allow. And this is what I mean when I say paired reading. So imagine that you say something like this: I know that John rides horses because he enjoys being in nature, but I don't know, and now you follow that with a coordinated question, which horses and why he rides, right? So that would be a coordinated question. And that question feels like it's a contradiction. And it feels like it's a contradiction because the reason for why he rides horses is already given, because he enjoys being in nature, right? But when you do that, when you follow that with a coordinated sluice, but I don't know which horses and why, that coordinated sluice is much better, doesn't feel like a contradiction, and receives an interpretation that we see in 14. But I don't know which horses he rides and why he rides them, why he rides those horses, right? So apart from why, the reason that he rides is being in nature, what this why asks about is the reason for riding those specific horses. So this is what we call the paired reading, and this paired reading is available for coordinated sluices, but not for coordinated questions. So all of these differences between coordinated questions and coordinated sluices suggest that in coordinated questions, each clausal conjunct only contains one WH phrase. So you have something like, what did you teach? And when did you teach? And when the verb is not obligatorily transitive, you can do that because both what did you teach and when did you teach are grammatical questions. But if you try to include two obligatory arguments of the verb, like what and to whom, then what you get is what did you give, which is bad because you don't have the indirect object, and to whom did you give, which is bad because you don't have the direct object. And also, when you have buy, what did you buy is fine, but when did you buy is bad. So whenever there is something that is obligatorily required by the verb, that cannot be a WH conjunct in this case, because it's going to be missing. That WH phrase is going to be missing from the other conjunct. And also, that's why we don't get the paired reading, because the why conjunct, so I know he rides horses because he enjoys being in nature, but I don't know which horses he rides and why he rides, since there is nothing that's related to which horses in the Y conjunct, you cannot interpret that as a pronoun. Coordinated sluices, on the other hand, behave as if each conjunct contained both WH phrases. So something, and don't take this very seriously, this is not the real analysis, but something like this. So I know you taught something at one point, but I don't know what you taught when, and when you taught what, right? So that the what from the first conjunct is present in the second conjunct, and the when from the second conjunct is also present in the first conjunct. And that also, of course, explains why you can have give as the verb and what and to whom as coordinated arguments, because each conjunct contains both WH phrases, so that's fine. Also with by, so you always get the grammatical sentence here because the verb's subcategorization requirements are met in both conjuncts. And also this is why we get the paired reading, because the Y conjunct contains the WH phrase which horses, which is then somehow interpreted as them. But the important thing is that there is something that can be interpreted as them in coordinated sluices, but there's nothing in coordinated questions that might give rise to that interpretation. So I will start by how to derive the properties of coordinated sluices. So coordinated sluices, for that construction, Barbara and I propose the analysis which involves the bulk sharing of C bar and the ellipses of the TP. So I heard that John bought something sometime last week, but I forgot what and when. We propose looks something like this. So we have the TP, where John is the subject, and what and when are merged somewhere inside the VP of that clause. And then what and when move to different specifiers of CP. In the first conjunct, what comes to the first conjunct, when goes to the second conjunct, and on the way up, both WH phrases have to go through the specifier of little VP. That's Chomsky's derivation by phase, his work from the early 2000s, which I assume, and that gives us the final what and when after we delete the whole TP. One thing that I want to point out here is that we assume that ellipsis is triggered by the so-called ellipsis feature, and that feature is found on a head. In this case, it's a C head, and it instructs the PF system to skip the complement of that head, in this case TP, for purposes of parsing and production. This structure will derive the possibility of coordination of obligatory arguments here, because both WH phrases are arguments of the same verb. They are clause mates, they're inside the same clause, so that is fine. And also, since the first WH phrase, namely what, is part not only of the first conjunct, but also of the second conjunct, it can be interpreted there as a pronoun. For that, we need some mechanism that's going to turn what into a pronoun. I will suggest later that it's vehicle change. Okay, so this analysis, the bulk sharing analysis that we just looked at, is more economical than the competing analysis, which is ellipsis, which would look something like this. So for the same sentence, we would need to build two conjuncts with a separate TP in each. These TPs would be identical up to the WH phrases, I guess. So this analysis is slightly different from the one before in that here we have WH phrases in the same clause. In the ellipsis analysis, we don't. We have what in the what conjunct and when in the when conjunct, but we can derive the desired reading of this coordinated sluice if we assume the mechanism proposed by Merchant in 1999. Before that, of course, this analysis is less economical because it uses a lot more lexical resources, twice of everything. It uses a lot more merge operations, a lot more agree operations. So if possible, we would want to have this analysis. So let me first tell you why we think that this is a competing analysis to begin with. So Merchant, in his work from 1999 and also in his book in 2001, he discusses sentences like 23. Which suspect did Abby call and when? And he points out that this has the interpretation, which suspect did Abby call and when did she call him, rather than and when did she call someone, for example. And he says the reason why we get that, so first of all, this string, which suspect did Abby call and when did she call him, that has to be derived through ellipses, and it cannot be derived through multiple dominants, because in multiple dominants, we typically have a gap before the pronounced part, so right node raising and coordinated questions. But things like this, where the gap is following the antecedent, are usually taken not to be derived through multiple dominants, because that string is difficult to impossible to linearize in this particular way. So assuming that 23 is derived through ellipses, what Merchant proposes is that the antecedent TP is copied into this spot at LF, and once it is, the trace of which suspect is copied with it. So it looks something like this: which suspect did Abby call, and when did Abby call which suspect? And then he says which suspect undergoes vehicle change. Vehicle change is the mechanism proposed by Fiengo and May, under which expressions of a certain type can be interpreted as being of a different type if they give the same meaning. So if you look at what this means, so the Merchant suggests that under ellipsis, the WH phrase which suspect becomes an empty pronominal correlate of this WH phrase, and it is interpreted as a pronoun. We will call that pronoun E-type pronoun. So people call pronouns like this E-type pronouns, where we have a feeling that this pronoun is the same as which suspect, so it kind of has the same reference, but is not C-commanded and therefore not bound by which suspect. So if this is a possible derivation of sentence in 23, then we could apply the same reasoning to the sentence in 22 and copy this into this, and this trace of this what would give rise to this it. So that's how we would get the properties of coordinated sluices out of this. But like I said, this analysis is less economical. So if things work out, we would want to have the bulk sharing analysis that I showed you previously. However, there is a problem with that analysis. This analysis, even though it is more economical than the ellipsis analysis, it involves a configuration that is a multiple WH fronting configuration. So the WH phrases, even though they end up in the specifiers of different Cs, which is okay. So we know that English is not a multiple WH fronting language. In English, only one WH phrase fronts per CP. And here we have one CP, one WH phrase, that's fine. But the problem arises with the lower phase. So assuming that WH phrases have to go through the specifiers of little VP on their way up, this should cause a problem because this is a configuration that English does not allow. So we propose to solve that this problem is not a problem because of the salvation by deletion approach that has been proposed for many different phenomena in various languages. So what we propose is that bulk sharing structure, this one, is bad unless you delete it. But once ellipsis applies and the TP is gone, then this is no longer an issue. Okay? So is that possible? Well, we think that it is, because salvation by deletion is a mechanism that has been proposed, like I said, for many different phenomena, including obviation of islands in sluicing, violations of that trace effects, violations of sluicing comp generalization, all of those. So in all of these works, the proposal that is being presented is that if there is an illegitimate structure, if that illegitimate structure can be saved by ellipsis, if ellipsis deletes the offending material. The most popular account, so this account, salvation by deletion, this approach has gained most popularity as a mechanism under which islands are obviated in sluicing. So let me give you an example of that. So the Balkan sentence, the very popular Balkan sentence, which is ungrammatical if ellipsis does not apply. So they want to hire someone who speaks a Balkan language, but I don't remember which Balkan language they want to hire someone who speaks. That is a bad sentence, and it's a bad sentence because this WH phrase, which Balkan language, moves from this position here to this position here. Can you see my my cursor?
Yep.
Yes,
We can
Good,
see.
good. Okay, thank you. So on the way from this position, the embedded position, which Balkan language crosses the boundary of the island. So this is an island for extraction, the relative clause. WH phrases cannot leave such structures. So if they do, the idea is that when they cross this boundary receives an asterisk, some kind of diacritic. We call it an asterisk. And then if that asterisk survives until the PF, and the PF has to interpret it, it cannot, and that leads to the crash in the derivation. But, as you may guess, if you delete the offending structure, if this asterisk no longer makes it to the PF, they want to hire someone who speaks a Balkan language, but I don't remember which, or I don't remember which Balkan language, then the sentence is fine. So this is salvation by deletion. And we adopt the same reasoning. We say a VP or a CP with multiple WH specifiers receives an asterisk in languages that don't move multiple WH phrases. But if the asterisk is deleted at PF, the structure is saved. So that allows us, or that maybe forces us, to say that multiple WH fronting parameter is actually a PF phenomenon. So we reformulate it as 28. We say in multiple WH fronting languages, multiple specifiers at phase edges do not cause a problem at the PF interface. So in Czech or in Polish or in Croatian, a phase node with multiple WH specifiers does not receive an asterisk. But in non-multiple WH fronting languages, like for example English, multiple WH specifiers at phase edges do cause a problem at the PF interface, which means that a phase node with such multiple WH specifiers does receive an asterisk, and asterisks cannot be interpreted at PF. So given this caveat about multiple WH specifiers at little VP, we conclude that the analysis in 29, the derivation in 29, trumps the one in 30 because it is more economical and it does not suffer from a problem that we had just discussed. So what we want to say is that both 29 and 30 derive the same string and the same interpretation, but 29 is favored because it is less costly. Now that we have that down, I want to talk about the analysis of coordinated questions. So this is the non-bulk sharing analysis, which I proposed in my dissertation, and Barbara and I have adopted later on in a series of papers, which looks like this. It's not the easiest tree to read, but we believe it is correct tree. So here what we have is we have two conjuncts where that share the phrasal nodes, but don't share the peripheral nodes. So here, the first conjunct is what should you teach, and the second conjunct is when should you teach. What is only present in the first conjunct, when is only present in the second. That allows us to derive all the properties that we have observed, namely the properties that suggest that each conjunct contains a single WH phrase. So you will not be able to coordinate arguments, you will not be able to get the paired reading. And this analysis is preferred to the ellipsis analysis, which I give you in 32b. This analysis has been proposed for coordinated questions by Wales Brown, for example, and Zoltan Banretti, and Ginakidou and Merchant in their paper in the 90s, I think. So in this analysis, we can see that it's less economical, not because it contains less merging, because this analysis also implies a lot of merging. So you have a merge here, and also a merge here and a merge there. So that might not make a difference, but at least you use fewer lexical resources. So should is used only once, you is used only once, and you don't need to elide anything. So we believe that that is the correct analysis. So to conclude briefly, I mean, what we have seen so far, we have seen that coordinated questions and coordinated sluices, although they're superficially similar, in fact involve different underlying structure. Both structures involve multiple dominants, but coordinated questions are derived through non-bulk sharing only, while coordinated sluices are derived through bulk sharing plus ellipses. And this is because both conjuncts have to be elided and multiple dominants cannot achieve that. Neither construction involves ellipses only, we argue, because PF reduction is subject to economy and ellipses is less economical than multiple dominants. And so now that we have established that, we want to actually take this analysis one step further. So this is English as we know it, right? In English as we know it, we have coordinated sluices, which have this kind of representation that I argued for a little while ago, and that representation derives the properties that are actually associated with coordinated sluices, so coordination of obligatory arguments, as well as paired reading. And in that same language as we know it, English as we know it, coordinated questions are derived from this analysis, and that analysis derives the properties that we have seen are displayed by this construction: no coordination of obligatory arguments and no paired reading. But what we ask next is, you could imagine English prime, right? English could be different. There could be a language like English, except that in such English prime, coordinated sluices would have this structure, followed by the ellipses in each conjunct, right? And that would give you what and where, the coordinated sluice. But if this was the underlying structure of a coordinated sluice, then we would expect coordinated sluices to have the properties like this. They should disallow coordination of obligatory arguments, and they should disallow paired reading. And in this alternative English prime, coordinated questions might be derived from a structure like this. What and when did John buy? And that should allow coordination of obligatory arguments, and it should also allow paired reading. So in what follows, I will show you that why English prime is not possible, why English doesn't look like this. So we argue that English prime is banned, among other things, by economy. So recall that we said in the very beginning that economy favors least effort derivations from the set of possible derivations that arrive at the same string with the same interpretation, but also bans derivations in which PF reducing operations apply vacuously. In other words, without having an effect on pronunciation. We take this second clause of our economy principle is taken by thinking about Danny Fox's principle of economy that precludes scope shifting operations that don't have effect on interpretation. So Danny Fox shows that you cannot, for example, do QR if that operation will not have an effect on the interpretation. So we take that reasoning and we apply it to PF reduction. So far what we have seen is how the first clause operates, right? So that was the principle that forces MD over ellipses, everything else being equal, because MD, the representations involve fewer steps, fewer merge operations, fewer lexical resources. And now we're going to take a look at how the second clause works and why we have it and how it helps us. So I told you, let's assume that coordinated sluices involved the Norbar sharing structure like this, in which ellipsis applies both to TP in this conjunct and to TP in that conjunct. So remember, we said that ellipsis is triggered by the ellipsis feature, which instructs the PF system to skip its complement for purposes of parsing and production. So in this structure, C is shared, and that shared C has an E feature. Now, in a structure like this C has two complements. This is its first complement, TP U taught, but it also has this complement, right? In the first conjunct, it has two, because the C is shared. This is one of its sisters, and this is the other, right? Because the mother of the C is C bar, and TP is C bar's second daughter. Okay. So what would happen if ellipsis instructed the first TP complement, if instructed the PF to ignore the first TP complement for purposes of parsing and pronunciation? Well, that would delete effectively this, right? So U taught would disappear from the structure if we deleted TP, the one complement of the C. So that would be fine because it would delete the string U taught, so it wouldn't be vacuous. But to this now, if ellipsis additionally deleted this, then nothing would be deleted, right? This what is already a trace. These guys here are already gone. So this second application of ellipsis would apply vacuously. It would not have any effect on pronunciation. And this, we believe, is banned. And because it is banned, it precludes the structure in 35 from being the correct structure for coordinated sluices, right? Because coordinated sluices would have two TPs deleted, and because the C that carries the E feature is shared, and that would mean vacuous application of ellipsis in one conjunct. And in addition, coordinated sluices, coordinated questions cannot involve the bulk sharing structure of coordinated sluices. And this is because coordinated sluices coordinated questions do not involve ellipsis. So remember, we said this structure is fine because even though it contains this illegitimate configuration here, once it is elided, we're fine. And in coordinated sluices, it is elided. But in a coordinated question, it is not elided. So the question is, what and when did John buy? And if we delete this part, then we are left only with what and when, which is not the deleted material would not be recoverable. So the the utterance would be uninterpretable, basically. So that causes the derivation. So the VP has to survive to the pronunciation. The asterisk makes it to PF interpretation. PF cannot interpret it, and therefore the derivation crashes. So that's why the coordinated questions cannot have the structure of coordinated sluices. So that's the crash that would happen. So to conclude, because I think my time is coming to an end, in this paper, in this work, Barbara Chitko and I argue that PF reduction is subject to economy, and that from the set of derivations that arrive to the same string with the same interpretation, the most economical one is favored. We argue that economy, well, we assume, not that argue, we assume that economy is measured by the amount of lexical resources used, which includes lexical items and features, and the amount of syntactic operation, the number of syntactic operations that are carried out, where syntactic operations are operations like merge, agree, and also maybe ellipses. And since multiple dominance derivations arrive at the PF-reduced string by using fewer lexical resources and operations than an ellipsis derivation, multiple dominance is favored by the system. And this view of economy derives the observed differences in coordinated questions and coordinated sluices, even though they appear to be very, very similar to one another, but are in fact derived in very different ways. And if we tried to flip the two structures, so argue that, or assume that coordinated sluices are derived from the non-bulk sharing structure and coordinated questions are derived from bulk sharing structure, we would always come to a violation of a principle of grammar. Coordinated questions cannot be derived through the bulk sharing structure because they do not involve ellipses, and that violates the multiple WH fronting parameter. And coordinated sluices cannot be derived through non-bulk sharing because that would violate the principle that we call economy of pronunciation, which would, because they would, the ellipses would have to apply twice, once vacuously. Thank you. References, I don't think anybody can read them, but they're here.
I like the crash part.
Yeah, thank you for the great presentation. It was
Thank you for
loaded
inviting me.
with information. And
I know, I hope people were able to follow.
I could follow you. I don't
Good.
know the others.
Yeah.
And
should I stop sharing, or shall I still share so I can go maybe to slides that
there may be some questions on your sentences. Okay. Let's go on with the question answer section. The listeners, the participants who are here, who didn't leave.
Is it an ongoing research or completed?
Yeah. At the beginning, she shared it. This is an ongoing project.
Okay.
It's actually no. It's
almost
finished.
Done.
I think we are now in the
done.
proof phase. So
Nice.
it's going to be published. We're hoping this month.
Which journal?
Linguistic Inquiry.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, it's really good.
With Chitko,
Okay,
you said, yeah?
Chitko.
Chitko,
Barbara.
Yeah.
Barbara Chitko.
Yeah. There are thanks for the presentation in the box. You can see. Are there any questions? You may open your voices or write it on the chat box. I think we can wait.
I'm so bad at doing Zoom. I can never see everything I want to see at the same time.
Özgür Hoca kamerasını açtı ama soru mu soracak acaba?
Özgür Hocam, welcome.
Hi, Özgür.
Welcome. Thank you. Hi, how are you, Martina? I think
I'm fine,
uh,
thank you.
yes.
And how are you?
Well, I wonder maybe I miss something while I'm listening because of my English. So I don't fully understand the concept of salvation by delation.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, if an ungrammatical structure is deleted, isn't it interpreted by computational system before it is deleted? It's deleted in PF form, isn't it? And
Hmm.
so it is still ungrammatical in computational system.
Well, I think that
Uh,
salvation
the,
by deletion assumes that ungrammaticality of island violations, for example, are PF violations.
mhm,
So there is nothing inherently semantically or syntactically wrong with the structure. What is wrong with it is that PF cannot interpret it.
hmm,
So the ungrammaticality is completely delegated to the PF side in
hmm.
this account.
So it's grammatical for the computational system. This deleted part is uh,
Yes, so islands are
yeah.
islands because PF has trouble with them, not because syntax or
Mhm,
semantics have trouble with them. That's my
mhm.
understanding
Okay.
of salvation by deletion.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm curious about, are there research on Turkish structures? Have you seen
Like this.
like this? Yeah. Multi-dominance
So
analysis.
multi-dominance analysis of Turkish. I have never proposed one, but there are multi-dominant, my students have. So, but mostly right node raising. So I had, there was a master's thesis that was defended in May this year by Alp Shehit, who talks about right node raising in Turkish and proposes a multi-dominance analysis for that. So something like Ali okula, ben de bankaya gittim or gittik, right?
Yeah.
And also another MA thesis from Paris, Adem Can Günal, who used to be an O2 student. He's an O2 undergraduate. He's a graduate from our BA program. He completed his MA on similar structures, but more complicated. So he looked at embedded examples, something like Ali Ayşe'nin, ben de senin, Amerika'ya gittiğinizi duyduk. That.
Okay.
Yes. And I have an upcoming PhD dissertation about hem construction, which is also where they also, Engin
About
Köse also
multi-dominance.
argues. Well, he proposes a multi-dominant representation. He actually adopts part of what I have been presenting here, so the economy account, and argues for the, multi-dominance if possible kind of approach. And there were other, actually, there is also right node raising, Göksel and Öztürk, I think, talk about right node raising in Turkish. So yes, actually there are quite a few, but nothing on WH constructions because I don't know whether Turkish has constructions like this. The coordinated questions, I think it doesn't have, because I remember when I first came after completing my dissertation, I asked about that and mostly got a no. You cannot say ne ve ne zaman Ali oynadı. There's a comment in the chat.
Yeah, there is a comment. Turkish. Yeah.
Ege Yılmaz, a student, my student. Hi, Kaan. Would Turkish be a multiple WH fronting language? Well, shall I answer it? So
yeah, there's an example from Turkish as well. Ali neyi nerede ne zaman yaptı? he asked.
Right. So you can say that, it's true, Kaan, but you can also, but this is not fronted. If you look at the sentence, neyi, nerede, and ne zaman all follow the subject, right?
Yeah.
So a multiple fronted version of that would be neyi, nerede, ne zaman Ali yaptı, which I guess is also possible.
Yeah.
But because Turkish allows
Yes.
sentences like this, Ali
Yeah,
neyi,
scrambling.
nerede, ne zaman yaptı,
Mhm.
we believe that Turkish is an in situ, WH in situ language where WH phrases
Uh-huh.
actually don't move.
Yeah.
But when you do observe them in different places, it's because they can travel across the sentence because they can scramble like other things can.
Yeah.
Okay, says he. All right. Any other questions?
I think there are no others.
Toparlayalım istiyorsan Esra.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
we can close the section if there are no other questions. Thanks for
Emre.
accepting our
Mhm.
invitation again.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, that was a nice
It was good
talk.
seeing you.
Yeah, good to
I'll
see
see
you.
you in a month, right?
Yes, we have a defense in a month. Looking forward
Nice.
to it.
Yeah, I'm also looking
Okay.
forward to it.
Okay. See you next week in the next talk. I
What is
think
next week?
Sumru Hoca var.
I think Sumru Soy we will host, and her topic is on the null subjects in sign language.
Sign language, yeah.
Yeah.
Very
I think
interesting. I'll try to make it.
yeah. Thursday again?
No, Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
As
We'll-
usual.
Okay.
This is
as
an
usual.
exception
Yeah.
for Martina.
This is an okay.
I'm so sorry. I had to.
No,
I had
that's okay.
something
No problem.
yesterday, so I couldn't make it yesterday.
I don't usually do
But
this
thank you for
to-
coming,
Yeah.
everyone.
Okay. I don't usually do this favor to, everyone. Feel special.
I was under the impression I'm doing a favor to you, but okay.
You're right.
You're right.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for having me, and I hope to see you next week.
Hope to
Okay.
see you, everyone,
Bye bye.
in the next week. Bye
İyi
bye.
akşamlar.
Bye bye.
Görüşürüz.
İyi akşamlar.